for another audience with Dame Edna, and most recently he is unleashing his first film since the two Barry Mackenzie movies entitled Les Patterson Saves the World. But what about the man himself? He is his own extreme creation, one likely to loom fearsome in the annals of history, not only as an actor, but also as a composer, an author, a painter, a collector, and a very dangerous practical joker. A man with a unique ability to appeal to the new generations whilst retaining the old. The audience are his family, he says, and it is a proud father who watches them collide into furniture while laughing to the point of tears. There was an enormous amount of young people who came to your show this time around.
The demographics of my audience reveal that there are, lots of under-20s. I sometimes look down and have difficulty spotting anyone over the age of 25 in the front stalls. That's probably because their parents have told them I'm funny, or their grandparents, perhaps, or that I'm being discovered. There's a new comic called Barry Humphries.
Yes. Do you think Celeste and Dame Edna have become rather trendy, haven't they?
Yes, I mean...
Is that brilliant manipulation by their manager, you in fact?
It might be. Look, I wish I could say that. I'm not much of a manipulator. It's all happened in my life by accident. I wish I could have said, let's get a young audience. How can I do it? I think if I did calculate something like that, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
But it's flattering to have these Edna boppers, actually groupies, young, rather attractive young people waiting at the stage door. Of course, I leave by another way.
Of course, of course. Is it a problem? Is something you have to tell the Southern Cross, the hotels? That
yes, I'm afraid I have to tell various hotels. We won't name the places I'd stay.
Sorry, we won't say that.
No, that's all right. But I have to say, I'm sorry, but if there are hordes of attractive and teenage persons wanting to see me, please give them someone else's room number. Send it to the Japanese commercial traveller.
You describe yourself as a regional monologuist.
Yes.
Did you do that so people like me would have difficulty saying it, or?
I did that so that people like you would have, be able to say what exactly is a regional monologuist. But look, it's even difficult to interview me, isn't it? Because there's not room for the questions. I tend to go on a bit. I like the form of the monologue. I like, perhaps in another life I might have been a clergyman. My father's uncles were Methodist preachers from the north of England. And of course I do have that strong Puritan streak myself. There might be a little bit of the Methodist in me. All my jokes are about Melbourne. This is the centre of my work. It's odd, I sometimes am conscious of it if I'm playing in Wales or Scotland and they're laughing at Sandy Stone, my favourite character. I think to myself, that's a Melbourne joke, and they all understand it. So it gives me this rather odd feeling of pride, I suppose, in the sense that I am, in a subtle and perhaps mysterious way, promoting Melbourne.
Barry was the eldest of 4 children. His father was a builder, and the family lived in Camberwell, a respectable and comfortable suburb of Melbourne during its most respectable and comfortable period. Menzies was Prime Minister, wool was £1 a pound, and Australia was the richest country on earth. We never knew where you came from, Barry. It was one of your mother's favourite phrases.
Oh, you've been interviewing through a clairvoyant, my mother.
Did you have trouble being understood, do you think?
I don't remember my mother saying that. I think there were times when I felt misunderstood, but who doesn't? I did from time to time think that I might have been adopted.
Why is that?
Because I felt slightly alien. Sometimes I still do. I think most creative people feel a little lonely at times. I felt that. I felt as though I was an outsider. But then I was able to use that in my work. I think standing outside ordinary life is the artist's posture. I think that's where we have to be.
Every season up we go, Simon, Ross and Stephen, spearing up here to the snow, deep and crisp and even. We kicked off with a liquid lunch, though the frost was cruel, drinking Glühwein with a bunch. a few young blokes from school.
And I described myself once as self-educated at Melbourne Grammar. And indeed, in those days, it was true. It's quite a good school now. It was a terrible school then, absolutely frightful. And it's no one of any talent much at all came out of it. Hardly anyone went to the university. I was one of the very few students in those, when was it, 1952, 51, who went to the university. And then that took me by surprise because I won a scholarship to the university. I didn't even know really what a scholarship was. I suddenly just found myself at the university, doing law of all things. And then I did a number of subjects, and I was in university shows. That's what I enjoyed most. Although I was very nervous. Always terribly nervous before going before the public, as I still am. I still suffer from stage fright.
You were the instigator of gargantuan practical jokes at school. Many of them are legendary.
Some of them are even untrue. And the trouble with the practical joke stories is that they don't sound funny when you talk about them.
Right.
People say, tell us about that hilarious thing you did, and you tell them, and they don't smile.
But you did.
It just suddenly doesn't sound so funny.
Yeah. But you did them more to please yourself than to please other people.
Yes, and our own little group, our little, what later became the Melbourne Dada group. We did them really to amuse ourselves, to alleviate boredom, and to provide ourselves with some form of self-expression. We used to like to buy things. You'd go into a shop and you'd say, could I buy a cake of Lux soap? You'd give them the money, they'd give you the change, they'd give you the soap. And you'd leave the soap on the counter, you walk out of the shop, and they say, excuse me, you've forgotten the soap. And then you say, I just want to buy the soap. I don't want the soap. I just want to buy it. Now, you see, it's not very funny, is it? But when you do it, it's funny. Because you're undermining the whole
You're challenging
principle.
the system.
You're challenging the system.
Yeah.
And if you do it every day to the same man, he ends up going mad.
Did he close up
money,
shop?
He's thinking, here are these people who give me money for soap, and they never take the soap. And then one day, I took the soap. And I went home and I substituted lard for the soap.
Right.
And I went in and I said, I forgot something. He said, what? I said, oh, I forgot to leave the soap. And I never went back. But you can imagine what happened. A woman bought the soap. She applied it to her armpit. It turned out to be lard. She went back to the shop. She said, you've sold me lard instead of soap. Look at my armpit. And the man said, that's what they were doing. That was the reason. And he went, and then I noticed the business closed soon after. And I asked a neighbour, and they said he'd become very ill and deeply depressed. Do you know me? I haven't been acting myself lately. Excuse me, Possum. Sometimes I get lost in my work.
I'll have them both.
But wherever I am and whoever I am, I shop with the American Express card. With this, I can almost always buy what I want. It says a lot about the real me.
The American Express card. Pick up an application where you see this display.
The American Express card.
Don't leave home without it.
What's all this then?
Newspapers, cartons and bottles and cans.
That can all be recycled. Save it for your regular collections. Now what's that?
That's me lunch.
I'll have that.
Oi.
You in the t-shirt. Go back and pick up that paper. No bin is no excuse for littering.
Do the right thing.
Dump that fridge here, and you can end up in the cooler.
Do the right thing.
Edna, this could be your last chance to prove you're a man and not a slob. The future of the world's health depends on it.
Will Les Patterson save the world?
Take your hands off me, you third world pervert!
How do you like me so far? And it's what we call the kangaroo position.
Try to get it right, Les.
No worry. Well, this is the sort of hook you should be using.
Your dad split me.
I realised that day I'd been kidding myself. And my eyes were a problem. So after I was told I needed glasses, I went straight to OPSM. They made them up in no time.
But a fish won't stand a chance.
The right glasses did the trick.
Hello,
Oh, well, I'm glad I'm wearing these.
Most obvious help to look after you.
Art was generally frowned upon, and in my youth, the things I was good at, I was quickly taught to be slightly ashamed of. Artistic accomplishment, certainly in the 1940s, early 1950s, was not a thing to be proud of. It wasn't going to get you anywhere. It certainly wasn't going to justify an expensive education at Melbourne Grammar. So I genuinely felt, well, I have these abilities and I'm never going to be able to earn a living doing them. What else can I do?
Did your kids think there was really an Aunt Edna, or did you tell them?
No, I think they rather like the idea of Edna. They know that it's me dressing up. And of course, acting is a childish activity. It's dressing up. Kids understand that. They very much enjoy it. But I look on Edna as another person. I think of her as a very funny-looking woman. She still makes me laugh, even when she's sad. Someone has given her a moustache and blackened out her tooth. Because the show's no longer in this wonderful theatre. And soon these great big contemporary icons will be torn down. They're rather nice pieces of commercial art, aren't they?
I read when Edna was made a dame by Gough Whitlam, she said, I'm sure poor Barry must have been terribly bitter and jealous underneath.
Yes, I was a bit. I'd quite like a knighthood, but no chance for these socialists. You know, everyone's the Order of Australia, aren't they? You know, it's sort of practically everyone's got it. What are you, OBE or something?
No, nothing yet.
Come on. I don't believe it.
And here I am, darlings, and I'm so glad I am here. Because, well, when I arrived at this spooky old Spanish mission theatre, I peeped in the door. There was Barry Humphries, my manager, waiting to go on instead of me. What a grotesque spectacle that was. Looked like something out of an amateur production of the Rocky Horror Show, or even worse, a professional production of the Rocky Horror Show. But I have to be here because I just can't let my public down. I'm sorry. It's as simple as that. A minute ago... Well, I could do this voice, you see, this high falsetto voice, as I learned it had an Italian name, falsetto. The Falsetto brothers, you know, are building a skyscraper in Melbourne. They're in the cement business. But I thought I could do the voice, and perhaps Zoe Caldwell could act the part of a Melbourne housewife. You see, I could be sort of speaking from the wings. This was the review we did at the Union Theatre in Melbourne University in about 1956. But Ray Lawler, who was busy writing a play called The Summer of the 17th Doll, which no one thought would work, said I should play the woman as well. And so we wrote a funny sketch. Noel Ferrier interviewed Edna, as she was called, Mrs. Everage from Moonee Ponds. Moonee Ponds because it was a funny name.
Where did you buy the clothes for that first performance?
An opportunity shop, though my mother gave me a twin set that she didn't like.
Right.
And also a pointed yellow hat that she'd bought in Collins Street that she'd never worn. And indeed, it did look like a clown's hat. And Edna looked very, very like a clown. Just hairy legs with socks and men's shoes. Edna's legs look like that.
Beautiful.
If this wasn't a rehearsal, if we were really doing this interview, we could get them to do a close-up again. I wonder if they're going to get a close-up of old Les. He was another character. He wasn't born on a bus. He was, I suppose, born in a Sydney Leagues Club. Edna is Melbourne. Les is Sydney. What a difference. This is the face of Sydney. He created the role of Minister for the Arts, didn't he, really? Everyone struggled to follow. Neville ran, but they lagged far behind. The tie is very well painted by the commercial artist who did this poster. I bought that in a very good menswear shop in Portugal. The teeth were made for me in Perth by a not very good dentist.
He's a bit of a sex symbol, isn't he?
Yes, women like him, and girls like him to spit on them. They sit in the front row hoping that Les's copious expectorations will fall like dew upon them. You know, he's replaced Mick Jagger, I think.
First cab off the rank tonight is Barry Humphries in an artistic cameo. Barry isn't a poofter, but he gives a pretty good impression of one. He'll be followed by none other than Dame Edna Everage, ladies and gentlemen. No worries. And when the magistrar from Mooney Cons steps athwart these boards, I want you to give her the clap she so richly deserves. Now, I haven't seen this show. I have not seen... Pull yourself together, for Christ's sake, will you? Oh, I know what all you Sheilas are staring at. I know. You're all looking at my penis, aren't you? And there she is, ladies and gentlemen. No worries. My little pink penis, little Tommy Kalinske. She's lovely and she'd be in it, no worries.
Always wanted to ask you, which I will right now, have you ever had any unsavoury things happen to you when you've been on stage?
Sitting on park benches like this, one expects something unsavoury to happen at any minute, particularly with a man with a coat as big as yours.
With the sleeves so short.
There's so little on it. Unsavoury things happen when?
Like laddie throwing. Has there been any of you ever been sued, or is there any?
Well, apparently, I read in the paper, I don't think it's probably inappropriate to mention this, but I think there is a court action of some kind. I think someone was lightly grazed by a floral tribute. But this is certainly not intentional. Think how many millions of gladioli I've thrown into the audience. It all began because I thought of the glad as a symbol, really, of suburban respectability and the thrusting vulgarity of the early 50s. I had a vase of them on the piano on stage. I saw a woman one evening looking at the glads and not me, so I threw the flowers at her. She immediately distributed them along the front row, and I saw these people waving them in time to the final song. I thought, that's the ending to the show, and I've kept it in. I'm the biggest customer for gladioli in the world. In London, when they were £1 each, a florist used to buy a ticket every night and collect them and sell them. But 1 dozen became 10 dozen. And now thousands of glads are thrown out a week. They're all grown on a farm in Queensland. In fact, I think I should really own a gladiator farm. I've got to like them too. I used to detest them. But the other day I gave a bunch of beautiful white gladioli to a friend of mine, and they were the most sophisticated looking flowers I think I've ever seen.
As manager of your characters, do you feel a responsibility to keep going? Do you think people would feel cheated if you stopped at some point?
Yes, I think they would. I keep going so long as I think the characters have got something to say, so long as I can express something through these characters. And I'd be very sad if they passed away. I think there's still a lot of life in Edna, because she personifies so many of the aspirations, not just of Australian women, but of women everywhere. But they're getting up to things. Edna's doing something or other. She's becoming a literary agent. She wants a chat show. She's doing a one-woman show based on Christina Stead, you know, Australia's most unreadable novelist. I can say that because she's dead. It'll be just called Christina, and it'll last about 5 hours. And Edna will be Christina Stead, and the posters will say, Dame Edna is Christina. I wanted to ask you a question, as a matter of fact.
Oh, really?
Why aren't there any wheels on this skateboard?
No, did you want an answer to that?
Tomorrow on 7.
I wanted to do all those things I'd never done before.
He's young, courageous, and dying of cancer. But rather than lying in hospital,
I enjoyed life more when I was dying than I did when I was living.
he'll grab a few weeks of freedom on the road. A country practice unforgettable television tomorrow on 7.
Sand sprinkled on a metal lid, a bow from a coat hanger and string. I stroke the edge. The sand vibrates in natural harmony, creating pretty patterns. So too, Cadbury Dairy Milk Chocolate provides the natural harmony of goodness and great taste. The 1.5 glasses of full cream dairy milk in every 200-gram block provides substantial nourishment, enjoyment, and that great Cadbury taste. So when you think of chocolate, think of Cadbury with that famous 1.5 glasses.
When you send parcels interstate overnight, You'll probably pay for a courier pickup, a private aeroplane, and penalty rates for people along the way. And if your parcel isn't really urgent, then you're saying goodbye to some rather big money. If it doesn't have to be there overnight, for just a fraction of the cost, send it parcel post. You'll save a packet.
You're young and flying high. Then you're hit with a big bill. You dip into your savings, and before you know it, you're out of control. But you've got essentials. A flexible package of key card, free checks, a special savings account, even a MasterCard and priority loans. That's essentials. And you're back in control.
Banking now.
Bank? Which bank?
Of all the temptations of your world and mine, there's only one that's too tempting. Halo bar from Street. Halo. Smooth vanilla ice cream, topped with rich caramel sauce, crunchy peanuts in a delicious chalk coating, so luscious, a taste sensation that's, dare I say it, heavenly. Street Halo, the ultimate temptation.
There are a lot of things that people don't know about you. One is that you're a very fine landscape painter.
Yes, I'm trying to leak that to the world.
You've got an exhibition coming up soon.
Yes, I have. I'm a very good amateur painter, Brad. I studied as a painter. I went to an art school in Melbourne, mainly because I hoped I'd meet attractive art students. But they're all much older than me and with beards. I wasn't good enough. George Bell was the man who ran this art school. He taught Russell Drysdale, amongst other people, but he didn't think I had any talent. And in fact, he discouraged me because I was good. I decided to pursue a different kind of art, so I became a surrealist, a Dadaist. I liked constructing pictures out of impermanent materials, you see. Everyone was trying to make a work of art that would last. And I decided that the best works of art, in order to parody this, I would make things out of materials that didn't last more than a couple of days. So I got a lot of meat I used. I had a pram, an old pram full of chops and kind of hearts and livers and things. And that didn't last very long. The blowflies invaded the exhibition. And I think that was called, it had a name which was so tasteless I couldn't even mention it on this interview. And then I had some spoons with sheep's eyes in them. That was called Eye and Spoon Race. And then cakescapes, things made of cake. You just got a lot of cake and pressed it under perspex. It looked quite decorative for about a week. There were some things that people bought. I got a lot of electric toasters and soldered them together, made a tower of them, and it was a project for a cultural centre. It's a pity they didn't build that in St Kilda Road. It would have been much better than the thing they have now. It was meant to be infantile. It was meant to irritate people who'd gone to a lot of trouble to learn about art. It was meant to offend people who'd recently acquired a little culture.
There was one where I was reading a book and I felt sick. It was,
yes, that was in fact a large plastic bathtub filled with books bought at an opportunity shop, onto which a quantity of custard, bright yellow custard, had been poured. And that was called, I Was Reading These Books When I Felt Ill. It was very effective because after a while the custard went mouldy. So these things were never sold. They were thrown out after the exhibition. And the idea of having an art exhibition and throwing everything onto a rubbish tip afterwards amused me too. I mean, I just did these things to amuse myself and to slightly disgust people.
Yep.
And it was meant to be funny. And I still rather like offending people. And I have a knack of doing it. I'm very happy to say I still give offense to people. Although I have this craving for respectability. That's my Melbourne upbringing. and my remote Methodist background, I still quite like shocking people, and almost everything I do offends somebody. Even though I'm being embraced by the Edna boppers, and the blue-rinsed ladies love me, particularly when I'm at my most risque, National Times critics are still deeply offended. You know, people who live in Balmain and Glebe consider that I'm ideologically unacceptable, I'm happy to say. Of course, I had a retrospective exhibition in the late 60s, for which I created some large portraits of Australian prime ministers and politicians. Some of those still exist. And I also did a thing called Willy Wheaties, which is in a private collection in Melbourne, which was inspired by the cereal packet on the breakfast table. I based this picture on the Wheaties image, and it was, of course, I mean, it's quite a good picture. I haven't seen it lately. And the person who has it is an astute man called Edward Clark, an old friend of mine. He's got it. I think he's sitting on a fortune, if only he realized it. But it's sort of before Andy Warhol. Andy, whom I know, hasn't actually paid me that compliment, however. The image of the Wheatie packet on the breakfast table was my first glimpse of infinity, really. Willy Wheaties holding a Wheatie packet, on which appeared Willy Wheaties holding a Wheatie packet, holding a Wheatie packet, holding a Wheatie packet, holding a Wheatie packet. And so since then, I've gone back to my early landscape style, and I don't make Dadaist pictures anymore. And I've taken it up again recently and found out that I'm very good, that all these years when I haven't been painting, my artistic talents have still continued. I found my hand was more cunning than it had ever been, my sense of color, my line. Many artists envy me my talents.
Was it the beach a big inspiration to you, though?
I like painting picturesque scenes. I like the picturesque. I have very middle-brow tastes.
Did your family encourage that?
In one sense, my parents said, Barry, you seem to be good at these things, but please, we hope you're not going to try and make a living at them, because you'll become a pauper.
Right.
But on the other hand, my mother did pay for my art classes. I was given the best oil paints when I said I wanted to paint. When I wanted to be a magician, my father bought me a top hat.
A magician?
So I did want to be a magician because I admired Mandrake.
Right.
And I wanted to be Mandrake because there are a lot of people I wanted to vanish. And believe me, there still are. Do you know me? I haven't been acting myself lately.
Excuse I, Possum.
Sometimes I get lost in my work.
I'll have them both.
But wherever I am and whoever I am, I shop with the American Express card. With this, I can almost always buy what I want. It says a lot about the real me.
The American Express card. Pick up an application where you see this display.
The American Express card.
Don't leave home without it.
I wonder what mood he'll be in, casual or formal.
I think this girl's is both.
Maybe you should wear a flying suit. I mean, with his sense of humor, you could end up in some little French restaurant or some little restaurant in France.
Oh, really?
Right on time. He's certainly a gentleman. Hey, and he only drinks Dewar's Scotch.
Of course he only drinks Dewar's Scotch. Don't you deserve Dewar's?
Thanks, Bob Jane All-Rounder. You've just saved another Aussie. Australia's top tyre engineers have utilised Bob Jane's years of hands-on motor racing and driving experience to develop a superior steel radial for Australian motorists. The Bob Jane Australian All-Rounder, a top-handling tyre with excellent steering response. It's long-lasting and has excellent braking ability. The Bob Jane Australian All-Rounder, the new improved steel radial, now at all Bob Jane T-Marts.
The day I wished I was in MBM.
Your breathing's going to become important. Keep it relaxed.
I really wanted the best for this baby. The best hospital, my own doctor, but we just can't afford it.
And out.
stretched to the side.
If only we'd gone into MBF before I got pregnant.
Feel as light as a cloud.
With MBF, you can afford your own doctor and the hospital of your choice. Join MBF. We help look after more mums-to-be than any other health fund in New South Wales.
Tuesday on 7.
Looks like a gun here, some type of weapon.
A new X-ray system to stop airline terrorism.
When do you buy the technology? Before or after a terrorist strike?
The Swedish furniture maker that leads the world.
A lifetime of abuse is simulated in a few days of ruthless testing.
Jeff flies the F-18 Hornet and never leaves the ground.
All in all, it's a very realistic ride.
And we visit the Australian company that has a multi-million-dollar secret when AMP presents Beyond 2000 Tuesday.
Films have been another successful facet of your work, yet you haven't made a film for 12 to 13 years. Why is that?
I don't know. I was busy doing stage stuff, which I enjoy very much. And I somehow distrusted the Australian film industry. There seemed to be so many frauds and phonies and people just chasing the money. Australian movies are too slow anyway. You can go out and make a cup of tea and Sigrid Thornton is still smiling. She's a lovely girl.
She's a beautiful
She could
girl.
smile as long as she was just a young schoolgirl when I played her headmaster in The Getting of Wisdom a long time ago. We thank the Lord for the guidance of his holy word.
Miss Annie Johns! Annie Johns! Self-confessed you stand there, a dissembler and a thief! Threepence from Miss Mowbray's pocket. 1 shilling from Miss Jackson's pinafore. 6pence from the school's Fijian mission collection. 1 guinea from the drawer of Miss McNamara, your own roommate. When charged with your wickedness, you could offer no explanation, but a desire for personal adornment. Indeed, the purchase of a ring for your finger. A ring for her finger.
A lot of people, both here and abroad, believe the renaissance of Australian film began in the mid-70s with Peter Weir's film Picnic at Hanging Rock, a mysterious thriller about some girls disappearing. But I believe the renaissance actually began in 1952 with your first film, The Hungry Bath. Do you agree?
Yes, I do. I couldn't describe The Hungry Bath, or to give it its correct title, Le Bain Vorace. It had a French title.
Sorry, I couldn't pronounce it.
As most Australian films of that period did.
Right.
But it wasn't really my film. I appeared in it and was one of the stars of the film. But a group of us made it at the university. And it was written by a friend of mine called Colin Munro.
Well, your film career blossomed in the 60s and 70s, especially when you went to England. A few cameo roles with your friends you made there, Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, all the English.
Yes, mostly cameo roles. Bedazzled, of course, has become a cult movie. It deserves to be, of course, like everything that Peter Cook does. I think it was Peter Cook and Dudley Moore's best film. And it had lots of interesting people in it. I played the part of Envy, I had some very nice green silk pajamas to wear in that part, and I became quite friendly with Miss Welch, Rackle Welch, who was just a young starlet, very anxious, I think, to perhaps go to Australia. At the time I was giving him some advice about coming to Australia. She could have really been a part of our great film renaissance if things had turned out differently, couldn't she?
How did you meet Peter Cook? Because he was a very big influence in your life.
Yes, Peter Cook was an influence in many people's lives. I think a lot of careers just wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for Peter Cook. I met him first in London in the early 60s. I then met up with Peter in New York. We had some early records of mine made in Melbourne. Funny little records called Wildlife in Suburbia, on which my first suburban monologues appeared. Peter admired these, and he just opened a nightclub in London, and he had Lenny Bruce starring there, the famous American comedian, who was at the last minute prevented from entering Britain on some kind of charges of obscenity, indecency, blasphemy, sodomy, something of the kind. And I was asked if I'd fill in for him, if you know what I mean. And so I did. The audience seemed a little disappointed that such a mild-mannered comedian should be taking the place of the outrageous Bruce. And my season at this nightclub wasn't terribly successful, but Peter Cook thereafter invited me to write for his magazine Private Eye. That's when the Barry Mackenzie comic strip began.
Do you agree with those cynics who say that English culture is going to the dogs?
Oh, buy that. Flaming dogs have left that many William III's on the footpath. That's a wonder more people don't slip and break their necks.
It's brilliant.
Mr. Mackenzie.
The two Barry Mackenzie films, the first one was done in 1971. Was that a pretty accurate reflection of Australians in London in the early?
No, well, in a way it was. I mean, I don't think any work of art, or even comedy film, and certainly these Barry Mackenzie films didn't aspire to be works of art, though I realize in retrospect they were masterpieces. It isn't an accurate portrayal of how Australians behaved in London. It was too tasteful for that. Australians generally behaved abominably in London. And I think a lot of countries do. When people are out of their own milieu, they generally behave badly. Look at the Japanese in Melbourne.
Cop that, you rotten pommy bastard. You must feel free to express your aggressions in whatever way it's most natural for you.
Were you disappointed that the Barry Mackenzie films were sort of dismissed because it became fashionable for Australian films to be a lot more serious?
Yes, I think they were dismissed, not by the public, I'm happy to say,
no,
because
very
they were huge
successful.
popular successes. I think if you have a popular success, you can expect bad notices, especially in Australia, of course. And the comedy worried people because it's not art, you see, if it's comic.
Hello. How very, very sweet to meet you.
G'day, Sarah. Glad to know you. Barry Mackenzie's the name, but most of me mates call me Bazza.
I'm Mr. Court. Ronald. Ronnie. Ron. Hello.
Bazza? How charmingly informal. Sarah adores that sort of thing. Do you know she went to the last Young Conservatives dance at Joffe? Sometimes her father and I wonder where she comes from.
On TWT tomorrow, a woman who came here to marry her sweetheart, but he died the day before their wedding. Now she's being deported.
Wait. I have my Canadian pensions. I'm self-supporting, ain't I?
After the Goodbye Corona run-out sale, there are still a few of Australia's best-selling family cars left. So it's time for the final cut. To clear the very last Coronas, Toyota dealers have slashed the prices one last time. So if you're very quick, you can pick up the best deal ever on a new Corona. This really is your last chance to save, so cut and run to your Toyota dealer now.
Oh, what a feeling! Toyota!
Sherman T. Cooper. A unique blend of Kentucky straight bourbon and the essence of wild orange. Mix it with your favorite orange juice. When you mix your next orange juice, give it a southern charge. Sherman T. Cooper, wild orange and Kentucky bourbon.
You're our new man in the Middle East. How about that? No worries.
Stop at the nearest pub, will you, mate?
Alcohol is strictly forbidden in our country.
Oh, I knew there'd have to be a catch to this job.
Will Les Patterson save the world?
Edna, this could be your last chance to prove you're a man and not a slob. Try to get it right, Les.
Taste the veggies in stir fry. Crisco, it's light. Taste the schnitzel in your veal. Crisco, it's light. Taste the tatties in your chips. Crisco, it's light. Taste the food in every meal. Crisco, it's light. Taste the French in your dressing. Crisco, it's light. Taste the carrots in your cake. Crisco, it's light. Let the taste come shining through in everything you make.
Crisco, so light, all you taste is the food.
Les Patterson Saves the World, your latest film, is an $8 million comedy epic. What sort of film is it going to be?
This is meant to be a thriller. This movie is not so much a comedy as a thriller. It's also a monster movie. There are special effects. Most of the budget is being spent on special effects. There's incredible scenes of horror, but it's family horror. You know, and violence too, and sex, but it is family sex and violence. Obviously, scenes of full frontal nudity involving Les Patterson in a family movie are going to be difficult to achieve.
And the love scenes?
The love scenes are going to be handled with sensitivity, and yet at the same time they will be genuinely arousing to susceptible members of the audience.
Good.
But he does represent Australian statesmanship abroad. A lot of people have said to me that Les Patterson represents an unacceptable side of Australia, but they've obviously never heard a parliamentary broadcast, have they? Les is very refined compared with most of the people you hear on the wireless.
Of course, you've got to have another string to your bow. You've got to. And I've taken up the singing because I love singing and I've got a beautiful voice. Because I know in politics it's fickle. One minute you're up there, you're a show pony like Andrew... oh, Christ. And next minute you're about as popular as a turd in a swimming pool. I kid you not.
How does he feel about his acting? Is he confident? Has he been going to school?
Well, he's been going to a health club.
A health club?
And I think it's too late for him to go to a drama school. But then some of our best actors didn't. I never attended a drama school. Look at me. It is possible to become successful without formal training.
Without being a tree or humming?
But it's interesting to have, yes, without... Well, I never wanted to be a tree. I mean, that's what they learn at drama school, isn't it? How to be a tree. Who wants to be a tree? What else do they learn?
Oh, they hum a lot, I think.
Hum?
Yeah. They hum and they hug each other. And, well, it breaks down inhibitions.
No, I like my inhibitions. I cherish them. I dramatize them. You know, I'm a deeply inhibited figure. You might notice I'm fully dressed during this interview, for example.
Are you a religious person, Barry?
Well, I'm not formally very religious, though I like the Church of England ritual, the High Church of England ritual, and I believe in a power greater than myself. I believe in spiritual experience, the varieties of spiritual experience, and I consider that I have had some of these experiences. I mentioned when we were talking earlier that I felt that I had some psychic ability. Very small, but I think I do have some powers of this kind. I suppose I believe in apparitions and certainly in ghosts. I've not seen a ghost. But I believe in the persistence of intense experiences and the interpenetration of the present by the past. I believe schoolgirls disappear. They all disappear. And they're reincarnated as housewives.
Do you believe in reincarnation?
No. That's something that silly actresses tend to believe in. And they all seem to descend from Queen Nefertiti of the Nile, for some reason, poor woman.
If you did, hypothetically, what do you think you'd come back as?
But if I reappeared on the planet, I would probably come back as a... It's the Pope.
The Pope?
That's all I I could think of.
Samuel Beckett had a theory about ghosts that comes across a bit in Sandy Stone, doesn't it? That the past, present, and future all exist on different planes.
Yes, the character of Sandy Stone, who is my favourite character. We might even have a little film, if we ever made a television program out of this, these talks that we have, by the seaside, on your farm, or wherever. Then I'd like a clip of Sandy Stone to remind the public of my favourite character, the dressing gown that I've worn now for nearly 30 years in the character, the hot water bottle. And Sandy, who was once alive, though always very pale, now dead and somewhat vigorous, somewhat more vigorous. But he lives in the past, he lives in the past of Melbourne. He lives before the war. He's a returned serviceman and he's also a returned man.
I've always maintained that the Morphy Richards pop-up toaster people and the HMV pop-up people, the Hoover, Heckler, Hot Point, pop-up fraternity, in fact, the whole pop-up conglomerate, never took crumpets into account. I don't think they'd ever seen a crumpet. You slip one in and half an hour later, if you're lucky, it glides to the surface as white as a lily. I reckon there's something in the crumpet itself. There's things in crumpets. I once read what was in them. One wet afternoon, I read the literature on the cellophane round a crumpet packet. You know, I like a bit of a read. There's a lot of reading matter there. It's got soluble solids of crumpet, edible crumpet fats, edible crumpet flavourings, edible crumpet colourings, emulsifiers, stabilisers, lecithin, niacin, riboflavin, trace elements and enzymes. It's one of these enzymes that neutralises the electricity in the toaster.
He also is the character which seems to unite the young and the old members of the audience. They all seem to spiritually hold hands while Sandy is speaking to them. He is the heart of Melbourne. He is decency, respectability, kindness, and intense, ineffable boredom.
How do you feel about Samuel Beckett's philosophy? He wrote, "We cannot improve life or mankind, but with the courage to face the worst and an ironic sense of humour, we can pass the time somehow."
I agree with it. Seems to be what I do. A lot of Australians don't understand irony. It puzzles people, I think, a little here. I've been accused of holding the same views as some of my most bigoted stage characters. They seem to think that I am Les Patterson, or I am Edna.
Suddenly the study door opens and there's the Prime Minister, a vision in silver, a Hector Crawford look-alike, standing there. He's seen me and he's an emotional bugger. His eyes full of tears, touches the Kim Hughes around the eyeballs. He embraces me. He says, "Les, we might have lost the battle, but we win the war. We're really sticking up the libs," he said. "We really will." And he said, "The young people love me. I'm going to get the young vote." I said, "I wouldn't be too sure about the young vote if I were you, Bob." He said, "What do you mean, Les?" I said, "They're all shit scared you'll give them a job," I said to him. At the moment, as we speak, the three-letter men, the tax boys, they're camped in my bank, taking a more than healthy interest in my private affairs. Someone has fingered me, say no more. I could see this coming when that stupid non-event from 60 Minutes done a doco on my luxury weekender, inferring that I'd profited from my position as Secretary of the Union. I don't have to tell you a man has earned the trust and respect of the entire membership, rank and file, not just in Australia, but on a World Council of Trade Union level, the sweet of A. You don't get to read a white paper in East Berlin if you're a dickhead.
Satire is bracing, you know. It is edifying. The satirist does try to change the world. The fact that invariably we fail, I don't think matters. Perhaps some satirists take too lofty a stance. They're too anxious to inflict their own point of view on the public. I'm equally an observer, I think.
In my opinion, the greatest joy would be to have both your personal and professional lives complementing each other, to enjoy the present and to feel the excitement of what you hope for the future. Do you agree? And is this a happy time in your life?
Yes, it is. I have had a period in my life which was very far from happy, but it was a long time ago. Sometimes I like to remember it because it complements and enhances the pleasure I have now in my life. I'm happiest, of course, when I'm working, when I'm on the stage in the theatre. When I'm not working, I wonder what happens to all that aggression. And of course, it's not just aggression, and it's a kind of intensity which only a performer understands. It's an expression also of love, I think. It may sound strange, but I have to feel a very intense relationship with the audience, with all those people, in order to do the work that I do. And when I'm not working, I miss it. I just invite the public to look at the world from my point of view, through my glasses, to look at life through my window for about 3 hours every night. It only costs them about $22, which is a lot cheaper than the Royal Shakespeare Company.
And very worthwhile, too.
And I don't do it on crutches. Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Whatever, after our picnic at Hanging Rock. Barry, thank you very, very much. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you, Brad, and more after this break. Do you know me? I haven't been acting myself lately.
Excuse I, Possum.
Sometimes I get lost in my work.
I'll have them both.
But wherever I am and whoever I am, I shop with the American Express card. With this, I can almost always buy what I want. It says a lot about the real me.
The American Express card. Pick up an application where you see this display.
The American Express card.
Don't leave home without it.
Thinking about new curtains? Act now and you can have your new curtains made free. Mars Fabrics are offering free curtain making on their enormous range of quality curtain fabrics, so you can have beautiful new curtains like these with 3 quality finishes: rod pocket, gather tape or pinch pleating. And Mars free curtain making is quality curtain making every time. Mars guarantee it. They give you a 2-year guarantee. With Mars friendly expert staff, enormous range and free quality curtain making, you've got it made.
When I first realized Amanda had a problem with her sight,
sometimes it's hard to see the ball.
I was naturally worried. So, after I was told she needed glasses, I took her straight to OPSM. The right glasses made all the difference.
That's better.
Very becoming.
Trust OPSM to look after you.
First, only gays and IV drug users were being killed by AIDS. But now we know every one of us could be devastated by it. The fact is, over 50,000 men, women, and children now carry the AIDS virus. That in 3 years, nearly 2,000 of us will be dead. That if not stopped, it could kill more Australians than World War II. But AIDS can be stopped, and you can help stop it. If you have sex, have just one safe partner, or always use condoms. Always.
I certainly hope that if we ever get together on a more formal basis, after our respective managers have talked money, for example, and we make a documentary based on some of the discussions that we've had, either, you know, at the seaside or on your farm, that it's a failure. Because if it is, we're bound to get good notices. I like doing different things. I like writing songs, for example. I enjoy writing lyrics very much. I showed some of my lyrics to Stephen Sondheim, who is so polite, he said nothing at all. Reactions? You get any reaction shots there? You can, just a few reactions.
And I flush more than most women of my age. But would you still love me minus my natural shyness?
I love the suburbs up there. There are so many of them. It's impossible to fit the Melbourne Street directory into the glove box of a car anymore without some lubricant.
resemble Princess Di. I'm shy, shy, shy.
I went to the Herald and thought perhaps I should be a journalist, so I applied to be a cadet journalist and was rejected by the Melbourne Herald. Otherwise, I might be their theatre critic. So I think they prefer people with training in sporting fields. I've always noticed that the fog is very noisy at this time of year. Oh, this is good. This is pantyhose. I sniff it. It's very good for my health. It's just a simple gusset of a pair of pantyhose. I sniff it. It's got some flowers inside it. Brad, do you mind not smoking during this interview? Don't sniff it all away.